We dive into our first 2022 offseason mailbag with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As we return here, it's another episode of Locked On Ravens. I am your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, and here today, back with a Wednesday episode, as we dive into, unfortunately, our first 2022 offseason mailbag. This Ravens team 8-9 and not making the playoffs in 2021. And here with us today to dive into this mailbag, a very special guest making his return to the show, the King of Ravens YouTube himself, and IngravenVids. How you doing today?
I'm good. I appreciate you having me on again. How you doing?
I'm doing well. You know, this Ravens team, I think, put all of us through a lot of emotions this season. You know, the heart is never still when watching this Baltimore Ravens team.
Oh, boy.
And it was clear, you know, the 6-game losing streak, something that I don't think many people anticipated. And a lot of these games come in close ones that the Ravens had in their fingertips. And it's arguable to say that, hey, if this team had just put together 2 wins out of those 6 losses, they're probably in the playoffs right now. And Ingraven, we're probably having a different conversation. And I wanted to start by getting your thoughts on this year because, again, wild, up and down roller coaster, injuries, COVID outbreak, you know, coaching questions, execution questions, just everything under the sun seemed to happen to this team, and it resulted in them just barely missing the playoffs. So, Ingraven, where is your mind at when you think about what this 2021 season was for the Ravens and then moving forward into 2022?
Just crazy. Crazy would be the perfect word to describe it. It's funny because, well, not even funny. It's kind of sad. I remember early on this season, somebody asked me, they were like, "Oh, Ingraven, doesn't this season remind you of 2015?" And I was like, "No, it doesn't. Yeah, we're getting significant injuries and whatnot. But the biggest difference between this season and 2015 is that while we're losing all these different people, we didn't lose our quarterback. Like, we still got Lamar Jackson, and because in 2015 we lost Joe Flacco, and then it was like, oh, okay, boy. But then we ended up losing Lamar Jackson too. And also similar to 2015, but also different. And I think the biggest difference between the 2 years is that in 2015, they went, I think, 5-11. So they knew, like, before the season was over, they knew, like, it was over for them. They knew that they didn't have a chance to advance to the postseason. They knew that as that 16th game was over, that this season was too. But this year, they since they had done pretty well in their first part of the season, they got to 8-3, and it was like, okay, yeah, well, we're set for the playoffs. And then the 6-game losing streak. But it's like every week, even though they would lose, and there would be these close, crazy, excruciating, painful, stressful, chaotic games, even though they were losing, they still had an opportunity to be in the playoffs. So they lost 2 straight, and it was like, okay, they're still in a good spot. They lost 3 straight, and it's like, okay, they're still in a good spot. They lost 5 straight. It was like, all right, not good, but they still had an opportunity. Even though they lost 5 straight games, they still had a chance to get into the playoffs. They would have needed a significant amount of help, and they got it at 1:00, but they couldn't even help themselves. So the fact that they went through a lot this year. And it was just, again, the best word that I can say would be crazy to just sum all of that up.
Yeah, it is. And I think a lot of people, when this team started at 8-3, it was so unexpected because of what they had lost and were continuing to lose at that point. This wasn't just like, all right, the Ravens lost a ton of guys in training camp and they were healthy throughout the rest of the season. They continuously lost players all season long, whether it was to weekly injuries, monthly injuries, season long, and then obviously the COVID outbreak that came in week 16, which was just like the most untimely place it could have happened, going up against that Cincinnati Bengals team in what pretty much was a game for the AFC North. The Ravens can't win that. They drop out of the playoff race, and then they had that opportunity to get in, as you mentioned, and they just, couldn't take care of their own business. But Ingraven, we do have a lot of mailbag questions here. I'm excited to get into them with you and answer them. And the first one comes from Eric Clark, who takes an offseason approach and says, looking at the free agent class and the draft class, if you had to only adjust one position with 3 picks in the draft and one position with 3 players from free agency, which positions would they be? And so this is almost like where do you trust the Ravens to build their depth through free agency, and where do you trust them to build it through the draft? Because if I'm picking for this team, there are a lot of needs, right? Maybe secondary, defensive line, offensive line. And so if you're looking to free agency, Ingraven, you're looking to the draft, what's one position where you could say, all right, I want 3 players from free agency at this one, and I want 3 players from the draft at this one?
I would go offensive line. Offensive line would have to be number 1 because that's where everything starts, especially for the Ravens. That's where everything should start. And you have so much uncertainty at offensive line right now. Depending on what happens with Bradley Bozeman, he could be a free agent. We'll see. Ronnie Stanley, this is the 3rd injury that he's had to that same ankle. So will he return? He'll return, but will he be the same? We'll see. And he's had injury issues throughout the entirety of his career. I don't think he's played a full 16 yet. So you need somebody on standby. You're getting Juwan James back, which is great, but how will he be? He started practicing this season, so he should be good to go for sure next offseason, but how will he really be? Patrick McCary, you signed him to that extension. Should he be your starter at right tackle? I still think you should look to another option and have Patrick McCary so to be that backup option, but we'll see what happens with that. At left guard, I think you're set with Ben Cleveland, and right guard, you still have Zeitler coming back. But on your offensive line, you have more questions than you do answers. So I would definitely say offensive line would be one of the positions to address. And even if we have to dive into specifics, then I would say tackles first and foremost, because at center, Bradley Bozeman, he could be gone. But at the same time, if he is going, worst case, hopefully they keep him. But worst case scenario, if he is going, and I feel like they can run with Tristan Colon Castillo. I feel like he would do just fine in that role. Next up, I would definitely say secondary corner, because secondary is Jimmy Smith. He could be going. Anthony Averett, he's going to be going. You have Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey. You have your top 2 cornerbacks coming back from injury. They'll probably be good to go by then, but still, you want to have depth anyway, because literally every single year, Ravens secondary depth gets tested for sure. If you come to the Ravens as say for instance, you're the 4th string corner on their roster, it's more than likely, unfortunately, but it's more than likely that you're going to get significant playing time at some time throughout the year. So one of my mottos is stay ready so you ain't got to get ready. Ravens need to really amp this thing up through the draft as far as the secondary. And one more position that I would say, this is a tough one, but maybe, defensive line. Calais Campbell, gone. He's could retire. Brandon Williams, pending free agent. Derek Wolfe, I'm not sure what's going to happen with him. Whatever they get from him, I feel like next year, it should be considered a bonus if they even keep him. I think they could end up cutting him, but we'll see what happens with him. But your defensive line, and then Justin Ellis, he's a free agent as well. So there's going to be a lot of turnover at all 3 of those positions, and just a lot of change, and just again a lot of question marks that you just don't know about. So those will be the 3 that I would go for.
Right. And luckily for the Ravens, they have 10 draft picks coming up here in 2022. They have a mid-round pick in number 14 in the first round. And yeah, I think for the Ravens, if you're looking to draft a position and kind of stick to one, I think offensive line maybe would be that position, because this is a very strong tackle class. As you mentioned there, Ingraven, you want to, the specifics of that offensive line is they need outside guys. The interior is kind of set depending on what happens with Bradley Bozeman. And I think that's great. You have Zeitler, Cleveland, as you talked about. And then, for corners, maybe secondary safeties, you could look to free agency for that potentially. I would not be shocked if the Ravens went, corner in the first round of the draft. I think you have a bunch of options there. Sauce Gardner, I know, is a very popular one among Ravens Twitter right now. But, maybe just veteran options. What happens with Jimmy Smith? Marcus Peters, he has a $15 million cap charge next season. Do they try to restructure? Do they let him go? I think, they just need players, and Peters is a phenomenal one. And I think that maybe a restructure is the best thing to do there. But yeah, I think offensive line, corner, safety, the secondary are my two big needs there. But Ingraven, you talked about just how different this team could look. And a Big Bird fan asks, how different will the roster look next year? Cap space is an issue, and they have lots of free agents. And the Ravens do. I mean, the talent that they have, you're looking at Anthony Averett and Deshaun Elliott and Bradley Bozeman and some of those talented players. This defense in particular could look pretty different next season. But Ingraven, how different do you think this team could look in 2022?
So much depends on a few of the moves will indicate a lot in the direction that the Ravens are going. And I think one of the biggest moves that could indicate the direction that the Ravens could be going is with Patrick Ricard. And the reason I say that is because Patrick Ricard, we all know he was the Ravens fullback. He was on his second contract as coming here as an undrafted rookie free agent, I believe, as a defensive lineman. And he switched over to fullback. So with Patrick Ricard, most teams, their offenses, they don't use a fullback. Ravens, I think the Steelers sometimes, the Chiefs with Anthony Sherman. It's only a couple of fullbacks I don't know. Oh, and of course the 49ers with Kyle Juszczyk. We all remember him. But if they bring back Ricard, then because I know there's a lot of questions about Greg Roman right now, if he's going to stay, if he's going to go, if Ravens going to fire him or not. But I think what they do, and we'll probably find out about Greg Roman before we find out about Pat Ricard. But if they bring him back, then I think that's a for sure thing that Greg Roman comes back and this offense remains the same. And that could lead to a lot of other things, but I guess we could talk about those later. But so he could come or go. Who else on offense? Sammy Watkins. I think he's gone. I think he's gone for sure. I think he was just brought in to sort of help the guys buy into Greg Roman's offense a little bit more and show like, hey, I've been successful in this offense before. Let me show you guys how to do it too. And he was helped to sort of usher in this new crop of Ravens receivers, even though most of them have been here before besides Rashad Bateman. And I feel like there was definite improvement from Ravens receivers this year. But I think Sammy Watkins, he will have come and went. And it's unfortunate too, because early on in the season, he was making a big impact. But it stopped. It stopped. I know he got hurt. And then even when he came back, it just, the impact was just not there anymore. I mean, he did get the touchdown, I think, in the Steelers game, but that was pretty much it. He was just out there. So I think he's going for sure. Again, we talked about Bradley Bozeman earlier and that possibility. As far as defense, a lot of guys. We mentioned Calais Campbell and Brandon Williams and Jimmy Smith earlier, Justin Ellis, but there's also guys like Anthony Levine. There's guys like Tony Jefferson, who in a short stint this year, he made a big impact. I think the Ravens are going to end up re-signing him, but it's a possibility that they don't. Pernell McPhee. He could also be another one that ends up being gone. Anthony Averett, he could be gone. Like you mentioned with Marcus Peters, that's a tricky one right there, because I don't think there's not one Ravens fan who doesn't want Marcus Peters back, and we definitely missed him like crazy this year. But with him, just like with Lamar, him not playing this year, it raised his value like crazy, because we saw what the Ravens were without him. We saw what the secondary was without him. So depending on how he's feeling, depending on what Ravens do, if they come to him with, hey, we want to restructure your contract, and Marcus Peters can be like, no, I'm worth like more than that. You just saw what y'all did without me. That could get tricky. But hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully he ends up staying and they work out whatever they're going to work out. But yeah, the Ravens, they have so many guys, like so many pending free agents. Josh Bynes, that's another one. He could possibly be gone, but I think Ravens is going to keep his number in their back pocket, because he's been saving this team for so long. I bring up back in, was it 2012? I forget. I think it might have been 2012, where Josh Bynes, he got called up to replace Ray Lewis. So he's been doing this for a long time. And of course, 2019, he filled in. They called him and LJ Ford up when Patrick Nwasu and Kenny Young was struggling. And then 2 years later, they call him back when Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison are struggling. They're like, all right, Josh Bynes, we need you, big dog. So that's another one too. So Ravens, man, they have a long. This offseason is going to be so busy because they got such a long list of potential free agents coming up.
Yeah, and I think it's such an important one too. I mean, even with the news of Tyus Bowser potentially tearing his Achilles, that's another guy who, if that news is true, that rehab could take into 2022. So I mean, just a cruel end to a cruel season there with that injury. But yeah, all these different players who I think the Ravens, the 1-year deal type guys like Bynes, Justin Houston, even Devonta Freeman, those are players who they have to answer questions on. But then the big guys, I think Anthony Averett's going to get a big contract in free agency. Bradley Bozeman, good centers don't really grow on trees, and Bozeman established himself as one of those during the 2021 season. Deshaun Elliott, his situation is a bit more, it's a bit more under the radar because he is now labeled, I think, as more of an injury-prone type player, had the healthy 2020 year, but other than that, has missed a lot of time, kind of in that Tavon Young category. So does he take a 1-year prove-it deal to come back to Baltimore, kind of raise his value a bit more and see what he can get? Does he go somewhere else if the offer is right? So, yeah, tons and tons of different free agents for the Ravens to think about and kind of shape their team. But I do think this team's going to look at least a little bit different, if not a lot different, in 2022. We'll head into our first break, though. When we get back, we'll continue answering your mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and we will be right back. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Even if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least eat something that tastes good and is good for you. And there are so many flavors to choose from as well. So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We return here. Our second segment of this Wednesday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still here with IngravenVids, and we're talking Ravens offseason as this team is not in the postseason. And it's still an exciting time, thinking about what this team could be, but still kind of like a what-if scenario. What if this team wasn't injured? What if this team executed in the situations they needed to? And here we are, Ingraven, talking about this. And a question here from Marcus P53 says, with the Ravens having the same issues under this coaching staff for the last 4 years, predictable offense to the struggle in pivotal games in the playoffs, plus defenses that play well for 3 quarters and then collapse, when does the front office consider making changes at head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator? Now, people seem to, or at least some, I'm not going to put everybody under an umbrella, but some people want definite change, whether that is Greg Roman. There have been some people clamoring for John Harbaugh to get fired as well. There are even Don Martindale guys out there who are saying, well, this defense, this hasn't happened and that hasn't happened. So Ingraven, if you're kind of the guy in the chair looking at this coaching staff and you're seeing a team that, hasn't advanced to the AFC Championship game in a little while now, are you considering making any changes here as the Ravens head into this 2022 offseason? And if not, when would you consider making those changes?
I think it's been time for a change, but certainly even after this year, because it's been a lot of the same issues despite the injuries. And one thing that I'm concerned for personally is just the future of these Baltimore Ravens. Now I know one of the first names that comes up when people talk about changes, Greg Roman. And I can understand, especially with Greg Roman's history, when he's an offensive coordinator somewhere, he's there for a couple of years, and then these same issues start with whether it's with the Bills, whether it's with the 49ers, and now with the Ravens. And it just the offense sort of just grows stale. And it's just, it doesn't seem like it's really advancing much anymore. But with Greg Roman, say for instance, he gets fired. What's going to happen next? John Harbaugh will have his say in who they choose and who he chooses to hire as the next offensive coordinator. And I feel like if that happens, and if he is given the power to hire that next offensive coordinator, we're going to be having the same conversation yet again for another year. And it's going to be frustrations with the offense, frustration with the offensive coordinator, just like we saw with Mark Trestman, just like we saw with Marty Morningwig, just like we saw with Cam Cameron, just like we saw with Caldwell, just like we saw with so many different people. This is why I feel like the Ravens, just their entire philosophy when it comes to this offense, it has to change. No, Ravens, they want to be able to run the ball and play some good defense. And that has been their things from the start, from the very beginning, run the ball, play good defense. And that worked for them in the past But this is a new NFL. This is it sounds so cringy whenever they say it, but it's true. It is a passing league. And just for instance, what if they got rid of Greg Roman? A lot of their first thought would be, oh man, what about our run game? What about our run game? If you have a healthy Lamar Jackson, a healthy offensive line, a healthy J.K. Dobbins, a healthy Gus Edwards, and whoever they decide to sign or draft their running back, the run game ain't going nowhere. The run game is going to be just fine. But it's the passing game is what is the biggest concern. And really the development of the passing game and the use, because the passing game did take another step forward this year. It did. So we can't say it didn't. It certainly did. But the use, one of the biggest frustrations for me personally is just the use of the weapons, the use of the guys that they have. And that comes to guys that are on the field, and it comes to guys that are off the field too. And a lot of the decisions that are made when it comes to active, inactive players, the doghouse players. Like we remember it was in a blowout game, but still the catches were still made. If they were drops, we'd be having a whole nother conversation, like with James Prochet. Probably has the best hands on the team. And he goes for seven catches for like 76 yards. And then for the rest of the season, he's inactive. Now, we could say, oh, it's because of special teams. Oh, because Miles Boykin, he's a special teamer. James Prochet isn't. But, like, don't you want especially your backup quarterback, you want them to have as many weapons and options as possible. But they had him inactive. And then the whole Tyson Williams thing, I was really hoping that this season it will go a different direction, especially after J.K. and Gus Edwards and Justice Hill all went down. And Tyson Williams early on, he showed that explosiveness. But he was doghouse, and it was just terrible. And then we saw Devontae Freeman as the season went along, he got more and more comfortable, and he got better. And he had some explosiveness to him. And again, as the season went along, his explosiveness, it improved. Latavius Murray, he was all right for us this year. He got better. He got a lot better. But it got a lot better for him when Ben Cleveland got put into the lineup, because Ben Cleveland really opened up those inside rushing lanes for Latavius Murray. But when we looked at our running game, and then they even brought Le'Veon Bell in, and Le'Veon Bell, his patience, it just didn't work with this offensive line. His style of running is not a good fit for Ravens offensive line. But when you think about the guy that was sitting in the doghouse literally all year and got his first carry in months in this past game against the Steelers, Tyson Williams, he had that explosiveness, but the Ravens still chose to sit him in that doghouse. And these are a lot of the questionable decisions that get made that have a lot of people frustrated with the coaching staff. But with him, I was hoping that it would be an Alex Collins situation. I remember with Alex Collins, he came to the Ravens. They signed him off of Seattle's practice squad back then, came to the Ravens, and he was good for a big explosive play, a big run. He would always get a chunk of yards on the ground, but then he had fumbling issues. So then John Harbaugh, he called him out one day after the game. He said, oh, Alex Collins, he got fumbling issues, but we're going to work on that. And guess what the Ravens did? They worked on that, and Alex Collins went off for them. He was crucial for their success, and they depended on him, and he came through. I was hoping it was going to be the same thing with Tyson Williams, but we only got a John Harbaugh call out, and we didn't see Tyson Williams anymore. So I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. That was just one example of that doghouse that just, because I would think that you want to put your best players on the field. You want to give your team the most opportunity for success, but things like that, you don't. Of course, the James Prochet stuff, you don't. The use of these weapons, we see with Rashad Bateman. As soon as he came back from injury, Rashad Bateman, it looked like he had been playing for the past couple of weeks, because him and Lamar, they had instant chemistry. And then, but with Rashad Bateman, there was a lot of times where he would be off the field. He wasn't hurt, he wasn't injured, anything like that, but he would be off of the field. And then we even seen down this last stretch of games with Rashad Bateman, we'll see him involved for like the first couple of drives and whatnot. We'll see him giving opportunities, but then usually in the second half of the games, it's like it seems like he's not even on the field because the ball doesn't even go his way. And that's not only on the coordinators and whatnot, but that was on Huntley as well for looking Rashad Bateman's way. But it's a lot of things with this staff that just have you scratching your heads with Greg Roman specifically. The situational play calling that can be a big frustration for a lot of people because a lot of times the staff just seems to not go with the flow of the game and sort of get lost and not be in tune or in rhythm with the way that the game is going. We saw even this past Sunday, the Steelers, terrible ranked run defense, Latavius Murray going off, and we saw these Ravens, I think from the 2-yard line, and they had 7 opportunities, and they didn't even get a touchdown. It's so sad. But it's things like that. And then with Wink, he's toward the end of the season, the adjustments have been a lot better with Wink. So with Wink, it's tricky because we always, as long as Wink is a defensive coordinator, we're always going to have issues getting to the quarterback. It's always going to be that way. But at the same time, his defense, they don't give up many points. So obviously the points, those are the end all be all when it comes to defenses. Wink's defenses overall bend but don't break. There were some situations earlier this year where he was putting guys in bad spots and he was playing guys that were backups like they were starters. And it was like, man, Wink, what is going on? So a lot of times for him, it will be situational play calling as well. But everything just really, with all that being said, so much just boils down to the head coach and John Harbaugh. We look at the Ravens. We look at their success first 5 years, 2008 to 2012 or 13, whatever. AFC championships, playoff wins, Super Bowl, of course, in the 2012 season. And then from 2013 till now, 2 playoff wins. At least he shared them out because Flacco got one and Lamar got one. But that's not good enough. Because I know a lot of people just think, oh, man, this season, all the injuries, da-da-da-da. And yeah, that's true. But look at the success that the team has had or the lack of success that the team has even had before this season. And one thing with the Ravens, a lot of times it seems like they get so hung up on moral victories. Like, oh, yeah, the team fought harder. The team really, they tried. The team really gave it their all, but that's not good enough. Moral victories ain't going to get you to the playoffs, and moral victories certainly aren't getting you Super Bowl. So when it comes to the question about change, I certainly wouldn't mind it. And it's not even that John Harbaugh doesn't even have to get fired for the Ravens to have significant change. But say, for instance, they get rid of Giro, it has to be EDC that hires a guy. It cannot be Harbaugh that hires a guy, because if Harbaugh hires somebody, it's going to be somebody that he worked with in the past, one of his buddies, or it's going to be somebody that Jim Harbaugh worked with, is one of his brother's buddies. Is going to be some friendship involved in there. And a lot of times, if you hire your friend isn't always the best person for the job, and they're not always the best person for business. So I think it's important that EDC and Bisciotti really step in this offseason to make some significant change, because if they don't, then it's going to be the same thing.
Right. There are definite, I think the Ravens have to look in the mirror in some of these situations and say, look, we've had success, but is it enough? Is the growth enough for a team that I think has so much potential overall to make it to the Super Bowl, to win a Super Bowl championship? And, certain guys can get you as far as the divisional round and get you as far as the wild card and get you this many wins. But, in order to put together, I think, a great team, you have to be willing to take those risks and saying, you know what, we can go higher than this with another person. There's no shot at the first person, but maybe this other person can get you to new heights and get you to your goals. And I think that's something the Ravens should look in the mirror, I think, with multiple coaches and players this offseason as well. But we'll head into our final break. When we get back, we'll continue our conversation about the coaching staff and answer more mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and we will be back soon. Hey, Ravens fans, this is Kevin Allstriker with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about in Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use promo code TOUCHDOWN and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill-up. That's up to 50 cents a gallon cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a month in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or any gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. That's code TOUCHDOWN. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the sports wagering action in 2022. It's a new year, and there's a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Take advantage of all the amazing offers for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. We return our final segment of our mailbag episode here on Wednesday. Kevin Oestreicher still here with IngravenVids. And Ingraven, again, the coaching staff under a lot of fire from a lot of people based off of the way that this team finished. Now, the fact that they were able to pull any magic out of the season in the first place is pretty impressive, but the issue was it all happened in the first half and not really any of it happened in the second half. And we saw that with the 6 straight losses. And again, as we talked about in that second segment, one of those coaches, Greg Roman, has been under a lot of fire, and Positive Vibes 0611 simply has, I guess, a comment here. He goes, #fire Roman. And so, yeah, it's been a constant theme this offseason. Well, I guess this season now heading into the offseason. But Positive Vibes also asks, do you believe Lamar wants Roman to stay? So if you think the offense wants him to stay after all the subliminal compliments that they've had. And so, talking about what Lamar Jackson had to say about Greg Roman during his press conference, he talked to the media for the first time since that ankle injury. And, he was talking about, Greg Roman's been great for us. And he didn't really want to get into the whole, what does the future hold for that? He's like, I don't make those decisions or anything. But look, when a coach, when a player talks to the media, Ingraven, there's a sense of coach speak, player speak, as in terms of, look, this is what I have to say to the media because, this is a professional environment, this, that, and the other. So based off your gut feeling, Ingraven, do you feel like Lamar Jackson truly does want Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator, or is this a situation where he was just talking to the media and being professional and polite about a coach of his?
I think he's ready to move on. We've seen Lamar Jackson. We've seen him vouch for people publicly to the media multiple times, whether it be coaches, whether it be players. But for Greg Roman, he didn't do that. Like we saw when Antonio Brown, when Lamar wanted him on the team, he said, "Oh yeah, I want the Ravens to sign him." But then when he spoke about Dez Bryant, he was like, "Oh, that's cool." He was just sort of reserved about it, didn't really sound excited. You hear when he speaks about Hollywood Brown and how Hollywood Brown, that's his guy, how he talks about him. But then you saw how he spoke about Greg Roman. When he spoke about Greg Roman in that presser from Monday, Greg Roman's been great for us. He's been good for us. But that's up to EDC and them upstairs. They make that call. I don't even want to get into it. So he really removed himself from the conversation, from the decision. He took himself out of that and was like, "Oh, that ain't got nothing to do with me." So I think Lamar, in the most professional way that he possibly could, he let it be known that Greg Roman is cool, but yeah, we're pretty much done. And of course, we know like last year too. Last year he threw Greg Roman under the bus, and Lamar Jackson doesn't throw anybody under the bus. He threw Greg Roman under. Oh, they're calling our plays. They know what we're doing. So that's the ultimate insult to your offensive coordinator. They know what we're doing. Like somebody saying that, it's like, whoa, hold up, man. And so I think that Lamar is done. Hollywood even made comments yesterday saying about the offense. Yeah, the offense, we didn't reach our potential. We didn't reach our potential. And even with that, we did have some nice moments, but we didn't reach our full potential. And then, of course, you got past players and whatnot that have chimed in, and a lot of outside media as well. But when you hear something like what Lamar said on the presser on Monday, you hear straight from the horse's mouth, even though he didn't say it straight up, just looking at the body language and just listening to the words that he used, it sounds like he's done.
Right. And the thing that stuck out to me was the fact that the intro of that answer, he goes, "Oh, Coach Greg Roman," for a player, it wasn't even Coach Roman. It was Coach Greg Roman. Maybe he was just thrown off by the question or something like that, but he didn't address it in it wasn't a friendly manner or anything like that. It also wasn't, you mentioned, he wasn't throwing him under the bus or anything. Lamar Jackson, one of the, most polite people in the entire NFL. He has a lot of respect for everybody that he works with and talks to, but the answer from him, it seems like he was not necessarily enthusiastic is the word I'll use about that. But at the same time, maybe he was being genuine. Lamar Jackson is a genuine person, but there's a lot behind the scenes that we again don't really know about there. But Ingraven, there's a question. We talked about the defensive line a bit in that first segment, and Dean Carter asks, how many D linemen do we pick up this offseason? Now, you talked about Calais Campbell and Brandon Williams potentially being gone with retirement. Brandon Williams made it clear that as long as the Ravens want him, he will be there. So that's a nice little tidbit to have. But, there are real questions because you have Justin Madubuike, you have Broderick Washington, you mentioned Derek Wolfe as well as kind of like a iffy, what's going to happen type deal. They could draft a player like Jordan Davis in the first round if they wanted to. They could sign a couple depth pieces as well. But how many defensive linemen would you anticipate this team picking up based off of your early predictions of what could happen this offseason?
Yeah, it just depends on how many they lose. And if I'm assuming that everybody who is a free agent stays a free agent and doesn't come back, Brandon Williams, Calais Campbell, and Justin Ellis, then I would say, yeah, you got to replace all of those guys. And I would say that you definitely want to get, and it seems like with the Madubuike pick, when they selected him, it seemed as if they were sort of trying to change things up and get more athletic up front. And also with that trade for Calais Campbell too, because with Brandon Williams, good run stuffer, that was his thing. That was his bread and butter, but that was it. And it seems as if the Ravens want to sort of move off of that type of defensive lineman and get guys that can do more. And hopefully this year, when they do revamp that defensive line, they can get guys that can really get consistent interior pressure, because that would make literally everybody's jobs that much easier. But as far as a number, I would say 3 defensive linemen. I would say probably 2 drafted and 1 free agent pickup.
Yeah, that's right around what I have also. I would not anticipate every single defensive lineman returning in 2022. I mean, not just for the fact that retirements and whatnot, but I just think, it needs a little bit of change. This is a defense that I think has had a lot of questions in terms of interior pressure over recent seasons. They got Calais Campbell to kind of help with that, and he hasn't really been an interior pass rush presence in terms of sacks, right? The pressures have been there at times, and I'm not trying to discount that, but they do need a bit more, I think, interior pass rush pressure. And I know a lot of people watched that national championship game and saw Jordan Davis, get to Bryce Young and have a couple of big plays there. So people are kind of clamoring for him a little bit. But yeah, this defensive line is one of the areas in Grave we talk about change. And that's one of the, I think, areas of this team that could change a really big amount. But finally here, we have a question about Twitter. This is a fun little interesting one. And DW Drummer number 9 asks, why do people on Twitter think that they can actually get a coach fired? They think if they keep complaining about him and asking for him to be let go, that'll actually work. LOL, I believe you know whom I speak of, and I absolutely do know who he is speaking of right here. But it's not even just a Greg Roman. There have been calls for John Harbaugh for a little while now, which, to each their own, everybody has their opinion. But, a lot of people go Ingraven and they will at the Ravens official account. They will at people who work for the team, at players, even at the coaches themselves, and are like, you know what, fire this person, fire that person. Like, Twitter is a place to express your opinion. Definitely. Everybody has a right to do that, as long as they aren't getting crazy with, super disrespectful stuff. It's a place to express your opinion and have that platform to do so. But, some people, they will, constantly at the Ravens account, at this, at that. So what's your overall take here, Ingraven, on Twitter and just the platform, that people will use to say, fire this person, fire that person, and then expect the team to act on, what they say there?
I think with social media, gift and a curse, because social media, it gives you instant access to people around the world. And that could be your friends, family, it could be celebrities, players, blah, blah, blah. But the curse about it is also that it gives you instant access to people around the world, whether it be your friends, families, celebrities, or a lot of players. And with social media, with fans and people having that access to players and teams and whatnot, a lot of people, they feel like they may own the players. They feel like they may since I can tweet this player, then he has to hear what I have to say, or she has to hear what I have to say. This team needs to hear what I have to say. I'm gonna at them, and they need to know directly from me that this is exactly what they need to do. So people, I feel like there's a lot of entitlement from certain people when it comes to social media. There's a lot of it can be sort of they can be proud, and they can be sort of arrogant, like, okay, well, I don't like how he played today. I'm gonna at him, and I'm gonna be disrespectful about it too. Da 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 da. It's like, and a lot of it just doesn't make any sense. A lot of it is uncalled for, and enough times with football fans, or just fans in general, but certainly football fans, since it is such an aggressive sport, a lot of fans, they have a lot of aggression too, and a lot of people don't know how to. Some people don't know how to take wins. Some people don't know how to take losses. And with the Ravens specifically this season, it's been obviously a lot of losing, especially down the stretch. And that has sent a lot of people just going crazy, and a lot of people being disrespectful. It's obviously brought out a lot of different debates, a lot of different arguments from people back and forth. It can be hard, especially on Twitter. It can be very hard to find somebody who you disagree with, but who can also keep it respectful at the same time. That's like almost asking for the impossible. So I think with a lot of Ravens fans, they have been spoiled from the engagement and how interactive Ravens Twitter is with the fans, whether it be players with the fans, whether it be the social media team like Ryan Mink, Garrett Downing, Cassie Calvert, how interactive they are with the fans, because they're very interactive. And Ravens as a whole, they are very interactive with the fans, and their fan experience is great. And just their presentation, like you going to the games and stuff, is great. They got all this trivia stuff. They have a lot of stuff for the fans. So I think the fans, since they receive so much of that they in turn, they take that and like, all right, since they interact with us so much, you know what? Let me interact with them and let let them know exactly how I feel, and they need to hear me. So a lot of people don't know how to express themselves the right way, and a lot of people have all this misdirected anger, and they want somebody to hear them. I think that's one of the biggest problems too, that people are just so frustrated, and they don't know where to turn. They don't know who to at. They don't know who to talk to. So they like, you know what? I'm going straight to the source. I'm going right at the Ravens, and they're gonna hear me. But it's really all for, not necessarily for nothing, but you're talking to the wrong people.
Right. And I think some people would be surprised how much of their stuff, one, is seen and two, isn't seen. It's kind of a two-way street there. But for example, like with the Patrick Queen stuff, even all those months ago, where people were just adding him all the time and saying, you need to tackle better. You need to do. It's not like Patrick Queen didn't think of that. Right. Like it's not like this person on Twitter says, hey, you need to tackle better. And Patrick Queen goes, I didn't really think of that. That's a good, exactly. He understands that he needs to play. It's those types of things where, look, I understand being reactionary to stuff. I mean, look, everybody has had those moments for sure. But, it's about handling it in a respectful manner that I think is the most important part. People are allowed to have opinions. I'm not saying you can't have an opinion on who should be hired, who should be fired, who should be signed, who needs to play better, right? All those things, you're allowed to have an opinion about that. But I do think that it's a matter of being respectful about it and, having those kind of interactions instead of, being disrespectful, and then it blows up into something that who thought it would ever get to this point. So social media, I agree with you, Ingraven. It's a blessing and a curse, as you put it there. And I think that people, they're not going to stop adding players. They're not going to stop adding the social media team. But, just hopefully people will hear our message here and just, respectful is the key word that I want to keep relaying there. But Ingraven, that's all I have for you here today. It's always a pleasure hopping on with you here, talking Ravens football. And although the team is not in the postseason this year, there's a, I think, pretty fun offseason ahead, an interesting one for sure, and a very important one. But where can people find your work and what you're working on?
You can find me on Twitter, not adding any of the players in no disrespectful way, despite how good or bad the Ravens do. It's IngravenVids. YouTube, it's IngravenVids. We do videos daily, and despite it being the off season, we don't have an off season over here. So the YouTube team, keep it clean. Just search IngravenVids on there, Instagram, everything. It's just IngravenVids. I appreciate you having me on again. And like you did say, I agree. It is always fun. This was an extra fun one. I wish like this off-season talk could have started about a month and change from now, but it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's disappointing that the Ravens season ended the way it did, but this is still a team that has a lot of potential. And yeah, I think it'll be a fun 2022 season. But be sure to check out Ingraven stuff. If you want consistency and staying on top of the latest news, Ingraven is definitely the guy for you. So check out his work. It'll be in the description below. But that's all I have for you today here on Locked On Ravens. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be continuing to analyze this team's 2021 season as they head into the 2022 offseason. So stay tuned for that. And I will see you tomorrow.